So before we start, I do want to talk about this box just a little bit. So in my effort of just now starting on HackTheBox and wanting to do a walkthrough every week, I found this box very difficult. It is a 50-point box. It brought a lot of pain into my life, and it was a gut check. There was a lot of lost sleep over this box, and I had to work hard on it to produce it in a matter of time to get it to you upon retirement. So we did end up rooting this box. There's a lot of crazy stuff that goes on, and it's quite the twists and turns, but we'll get there. So let's go ahead and take a look at the Nmap scan here. So I'll just gedit the Nmap that I have. If we look at this, there's really not a lot going on. We could see that it's Microsoft IIS, and there is a Street Fighter Club website here. There's nothing else really going on for us. So what we can do is we can go out to the web and we can go to this address and see what we can find. Okay, and we come across this website. Blow it up a little bit here. So when we're looking at this website, we can kind of look around and see if there's anything to click on, but if you look, it's all just a redirect here. These links don't go anywhere. There's no links anywhere on the sides that are going anywhere, and you can kind of read through this, but the information that you need is actually right here in the front. So there's an important announcement. It mentions the website streetfighterclub.htb, that they're creating this new modern look, and that there's an old website for members. So we should be interested in this old website because there's not really a lot to go here. We can Dirb bust this and see if there is any extra directories, but just to save time, I will say that I already did that and there were no extra directories. So we need to figure out how we can access an old member site and get to the streetfighterclub.htb. So this streetfighterclub.htb, we need to get there, but we're going to have an issue with that because if we were to type that in, you're going to see it doesn't know where to go. That's because there's no DNS on this machine. If we come back here and we look, we don't see port 53 open. So since there's no DNS on the machine, it doesn't know how to get there to this address. So we're going to have to map that ourselves. We could do that by modifying the /etc host file. So if we say cat and we go /etc host, you can take a look at it real quick. Okay, so this tells you what to resolve to for DNS. And we have just our local host here in Cali. We can add to this. Let's just go ahead and gedit this. And what I like to do when I modify this, I like to save as, and I like to call this host.old. We'll replace it because I've already done it once. Okay, so we have the old host there, and what we'll do is we'll just add in 10.10.10.72. We'll hit tab, and we'll call it Street Fighter Club.htb. Okay, so if we refresh, still not getting anything. Okay, so what path does this lead us down? Well, this leads us down a couple of things. We can sit here and we can try to brute force this streetfighterclub.htb, and we can see if Dirbuster or Dirb or one of our tools can find a directory that's there. That was my first attempt at this, and I was unable to find any directories through that matter. The second thought that I had was to look at subdomains. So subdomains are a domain that comes before, right? So we could have 1.streetfighterclub.htb, etc., etc. So with that, though, we would need to find the correct subdomain, and we're going to have to brute force that. Brute forcing a subdomain without anywhere to point to is not necessarily that easy. We're going to have to actually modify our /etc host to include a whole list of these subdomains and see if we can gain access to any of them. So I'll show you how I did that. There may be a better way out there, but this way worked for me. So let's go ahead. Well, we can save this. Actually, that might be why this didn't work in the first place. We should have saw something. Let's try calling this host and see what happens here. So save this, replace, and we'll hit this. Okay, so it does work now. We do see the DNS. So we have the DNS, but we still need to find the subdomains. So let's go ahead and talk about that. So we're going to look for a name list. And if we type in locate name list here, called namelist.txt, there's 3. The one I like to use is this DNS recon name list right here. So let's gedit this and just kind of take a look at what's in it real quick. Okay, so there is a bunch of names essentially, right? This is for DNS, and what we want to do is we want to put all of these names in front of a period and then streetfighterclub.htb. So we could probably write a script for that. I'm sure some of you are fairly savvy and can do it really quick. Being a former accountant, I actually have a fast method myself, which may be unconventional, but I like it. I use Excel. So I just put the web address here. I put the DNS from the name list here. So if you scroll through this, it's all those same names. We've got the .streetfighterclub.htb, and then I just combine them here, right? So pretty straightforward, though we do have something along the lines of 1,900 of them. So what we can do is we'll copy these over, and we're going to put all these in our Etsy host file. And then we're going to have to figure out which of these works for us. So if we go ahead, copy this, and then let's go ahead and edit our Etsy hosts again. So paste all that in, we'll save it, and now let's test it out. So if we go to like 1.streetfighterclub, okay, that works. 2.streetfighterclub, that works. It's taking us to this main page though, so we still haven't found that old member site. So how can we do that? We can do that with Burp. So for example, if we come into Burp here and we have our intercept, if we intercept this request to go to this web page. Okay, we have the GET request here on this host, and what we can do is we can say send a repeater. Actually, sorry, we're going to send this to intruder here. So we'll say send to intruder. We'll look at the positioning here, and we're going to want to set a position right here on this guy. So we'll add it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have to set payloads. So we're just going to make the payload similar to what we already have. We're going to use that name list, right? So if we go back to that name list again, we can just Control A, Control C, copy all of these, and paste it into here. So what is this going to do? This is going to go through and say for every one of this list, we're going to say 0.streetfighterclub.htb, 01, 02, 03, etc., all the way through. So let's go ahead and start this attack. We can ignore that. Okay, so a few things here. We have either the length, or we can sort by the status. So if the length comes out different for some reason, that may tell us that something's up. See here how this length just changed for the different. Most of these are 184, but we've got a length here of 1412. And we also have a status of 403, which means we're forbidden, where these are just redirects. This was redirecting us to the main page when we were doing these. These are just airing out right here. But if you look, we have a members dot, which is interesting because we're looking for a members page. And we have a different length here compared to the rest. So this length is an indicator, the status code is an indicator, and we should be very, very interested in the members area, right? So if we navigate out, let's turn our proxy off, and we navigate out here instead to members. Okay, we get forbidden access denied, but that's better than nothing. We at least found a page that we weren't supposed to know about, right? So what we can do is we can copy this, and we can go back into our terminal, and we can do something like Dirb on this address, and we'll hit paste, and we'll just let this run through. So this is going to run through. In order to save time, what I do want to show you is that the next directory it's going to find is a directory called old. So what it'll do is it'll find the directory or subdirectory old, and it's going to look through old as a directory and see if it can find any directories inside of that. It doesn't automatically look for web pages. It just looks for directories. So the next directory we find is going to be old, and that's also an access denied, but it's there, right? If we were to call this like old 23, it'll say 404 not found. So we know by seeing this 403, we're getting access denied because we're hitting on a directory we shouldn't be at. So we can dig further into this. I'm going to let this run for a proof of concept just so you have it. But we're going to open up another Dirb here. Let's make this bigger. And we'll say Dirb on this. We'll paste, say old. And then we could do a -x for a page type. We're going to do ASP. And we're going to do ASP because we're running on a Microsoft IIS server. So we know that that should be a .asp location of some sort. So we'll go ahead and search those and see what comes up there. Again, just to save time, I'm going to go ahead and just fast forward it. We're going to get back 3 different pages. It's going to be 2 logins. It's going to be the same thing. One's capitalized, one's not. And then we're also going to get a members page, which is actually just going to be a redirect to the login. So I can show you that members page, members.asp. That's 404ing. Let's see here. Maybe because it's not members, it's actually welcome. Let's try that. Okay, so welcome. And welcome goes to this login.asp. So we've reached this member area. So while we're in this member area, we've got a login form. So to me, immediately I start thinking about SQL injection. We can maybe brute force this login form. It looks like we've got a login type of user, a login type of administrator, a remember me button. So what I like to do here is I like to see what's going on in the background. And what we'll do is we can just type in something like admin. I'll type in admin here. I'll set it to administrator and hit remember me. And before I send the request, I'll go ahead and turn intercept back on, hit log in, and we'll see what happens. Okay, so we get a session ID here. This is just a token. And then we get our parameters here, right? So what we can do is we can send this to repeater just to keep it. Let's go ahead and forward it and see what happens. Okay, so now it's setting cookies. It's setting an email to blank. It's setting a level. It's setting some sort of check cookie. And then it looks like it's got our username and password that have been URL encoded here. And it looks like probably base64 encoded because we're typing in the same thing and it came back with the same encoding here. So let's go ahead and forward one more time. Forward again. And I think that's it. Now let's see if we refresh if it keeps those cookies. Okay, it does. So now it knows the last user that we typed in when we did that. And we can choose to intercept with that. Let's go ahead and do that one more time. I'm not sure that it matters, but I'd rather do it right the first time here. So let's go ahead and log in one more time, intercept, and we will send this to repeater as well. And we'll turn the intercept off. Okay, so with repeater, we've got this post request, and I can tell you that I spent a lot of time playing around with the cookies, playing around with this, trying to see if I can elevate privileges somehow. It didn't work here, and then I spent even more time after we got to the SQL injection, and I'll cover that here in a second. So we've got this request, we've got a post request, and what I like to do with these is we can save these, and we can go right click and we can say copy to file, and I'll put it in the folder I've been using. So we've got Fighter here, and then we'll just call this request. So when we're looking for SQL injection, we can try it ourselves, but I do like using sqlmap instead. So I will show you the syntax I use with sqlmap, and let's take a look at these as well. So you can see here that we found the old directory, and now it's looking through the old directory. We don't need to do that anymore because it doesn't exist. And then when we look through the old for the logins here, for the ASP types, we found the login and the welcome. So we've got those. We have proof of concept there. I'm going to go ahead and close this one out. So for this, let's talk about sqlmap. So my sqlmap settings and how I like to run it is I like to say sqlmap -r, that's for the request file. So that's our post file here. We're going to call that request. And then I like to run it at the highest level, which is 5, and at the highest risk rating, which is 3. And then I hit enter. And it takes some time. So it says you provided obtained parameter values will mostly be left over. Yeah, so we'll go ahead and hit yes on this. Okay, and then it's already picking up my old searches. So I'm just gonna go ahead and hit yes on that. And what we ended up finding on these searches is we ended up finding 2 different types of blind SQL injection, right? And both of them have to do with the login type. So this was a big rabbit hole because we could take sqlmap pretty far and we could start dumping. There's all kinds of things in here to dump. Eventually we were able to get the username and password out of this for the admin login, which ended up just being admin and test. And when you log in with admin and test, it takes you pretty much nowhere. It goes service not available, which if you enter in an incorrect username and password, it won't do that. So we did get valid creds. And it did give us an email as well. When we got that email, I tried plugging it in here and it did nothing anyway. So it was just a big dead end. Sat for a long time dumping the databases in the background. A lot of them were jumbled or encrypted or just a whole lot of nothing going on. So we could dig in deeper to that, but there's not a point. I just wanted to explain my failures there. Another thing that I did try doing was to do a OS shell here or an OS pwn. And when you try these, let's try shell first. Yeah, we'll continue. Yes, yes. Okay, so it's saying here that unable to prompt for interactive operating system shell because the backend is not a stacked query. So you need a stacked query to do a command injection, and it's telling us it's not. So sqlmap is straight up lying to us right now because at this point, I am unsure how else that we would get into this machine if we have the admin credentials and we're logging in to nothing. I tried manipulating the cookies and that does nothing. And what else is there? It's got to be command injection in my mind, right? So it took us a long time. And when I say us, I work in a team when I'm doing these. So we sat here and we did a lot of research. It took us hours to do this. This definitely wasn't easy. And we came up with something that looked something like this. And let me send it to the decoder here. So this is what it looked like. I have it already in the decoder because we had to URL encode it. So let's kind of talk about this. So we've got these commands here that we looked up, and our first thought, let me pull this website up. Our first thought is that we wanted to use a tool called certutil, and we looked up certutil and see if there was any kind of exploits with that with SQL injection. We found a page where a team talks about it. Now, certutil is like a file upload utility that Windows has on most machines, and it allows you to get files remotely. So we thought, well, maybe we can use certutil to download a file, and we can download that and then try to execute it on the server. So you see here it's using this exec-xp command shell certutil, and it is trying to grab a file from a remote server. And they came up with all this code, and we kind of tried to follow it, but we weren't getting it right. From there, we thought, well, we could do this, but what if there is PowerShell or something on the machine that we can run with this command shell, and we can craft some sort of exploit here to run PowerShell and just run a reverse shell. So that's what we do. So basically, these are the options you have to set in order to get command shell to run, this XP command shell. Once we did get that, we executed XP command shell here, and we ran this PowerShell.exe, and we just ran a basic reverse shell with PowerShell.exe here. So I've got it pointing to my IP address. I've got it pointing to port 80 on my machine. And all we have to do is we set up a netcat listener on port 80. And we can just take this guy, since it's already here. Let's make sure everything's right on it. Okay, we'll hit Control A, Control C on that. And if we're at repeater with it, we can go to login type and paste. Okay, everything looks all right. Let's go ahead and send this and see what happens. Okay, it looks like the box is timed out. I'm going to reset it real quick, and then I'm going to try it again. Okay, the box just reset. Let's go ahead and give it another try. Okay, and it just takes a minute. So here we go. We've got a connection back to our machine now. And I might have to hit enter here. There we go. Okay, so this box, in terms of enumeration, we enumerated everything up and down on this machine. Ran all the scripts that we knew and looked around pretty much everywhere, dug through the programs, dug through all the files, and it was really difficult to find what we needed to do. A couple of things along the way that we did notice. First of all, there is no user flag here. We are sitting as a SQL server, and if we go to users, desktop, SQL serve desktop, and we type dir, there's nothing there. So we don't even have user privileges right now. So on top of that, there are rabbit holes everywhere. If we go to C and we dir here, we can see that there is this folder here called scripts. We go into scripts and we type in dir, and there's a bunch of things in here. One that's really interesting, if we type PowerShell and do this on Sherlock.ps1, this is going to return vulnerabilities for the machine that may allow privilege escalation. I will tell you right now that none of these work. It is a nice rabbit hole to send us down, though, because we tried all of them. So this is one of the things we tried. I mean, we looked all around the machine. A couple things that we did notice as well is if you type in netsh firewall show config, you can see that there are 80 and 80 here on the inbound traffic. Basically, if we're going to get a reverse shell, we need a reverse shell through port 80, which we have, or likely 443 as an extension of that. So we need to elevate here somehow. We're on a kind of a weak shell here with netcat. It would be better if we can get to Meterpreter. We're also on or behind app locker, so we need to bypass application whitelisting if we can. So basically it came down to enumerating this machine up and down until we found a vulnerable program, basically by Googling, that would allow us to do everything that we just described. And it would allow us to get a 443 Meterpreter session. So I'm going to bring over the article that we found. So what this is bypassing application whitelisting using msbuild. So it has a proof of concept here, and it also has a tool that allows you to do it using the tool. So we'll walk it through with the tool, but we've tried it both ways and it works fine both ways. Basically, in the example, they're using version 4.0.30319, and sure enough, that is what is on this machine. So that's what we're having to do here is we're going to have to use this bypass to get a better shell and then go from there on our privilege escalation. So quite the doozy to find, but we ended up finding it here. So let's go ahead and take a look at this great Scott. I've got this on my machine. I put it in my opt folder. And if you're interested in this link, I do have it in the blog that is also going to be attached to this video. I've got a full write-up in text version as well. So there's all the links that I'm showing you in here will be in that as well if you want to do a little bit of research. So if we Control A couple times, okay, and we say here, let's go to opt, and it's called great, might be a capital G, great Scott, ls. Okay, so we'll just run the Python, or we'll just type in great Scott py like this. Okay, so it only has one tool to use, so we're gonna say use bypass. It's got 26 payloads, so if we list out the payloads, we're looking for msbuild. We want a reverse HTTPS, so this is going to be the guy that we want here with Meterpreter. Okay, so let's go ahead and say use, paste, and then it lets us select our options here. So we can say set lhost. My IP address is 10.10.14.12. Okay, and then we can say generate. Enter the base name. We can just call this shellcode. And it's telling you where it's going to put it. It's going to put it in user share, great Scott output, source, shellcode. It's naming shellcode 1 because I've already got one in there. We'll hit enter, and that's it. So for ease purposes here, let's go ahead and just show that we have a shellcode. So we got the shellcode XML already in this folder. I'm just going to use this folder for the example. What we can do is we can bring it over. Now there's a few different ways to pull information over, but one of the ways that I really like is using certutil, the tool I mentioned earlier. There is a pretty good article out there by Chris Gates. I'm going to bring that over here as well. It's also going to be in the blog. So if you look at this, he kind of references how he uses certutil to bring files over, and then later he decodes them back into a DLL to get a reverse shell. We don't need to go that far here. We're just going to be using certutil to bring over a file. So we definitely tried bringing over files. I tried bringing over executables, text, everything. You're able to get text through, we're able to get DLL through, but it's not allowing us, we're getting firewalled basically, or antivirus, as you say, that is blocking everything we're trying to execute. So we have to bypass that, and msbuild was the only way to do that. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. So what we need to do is we need to use the syntax that you just saw. So what we're going to do is we need to spin up a server here. I always like to use the simple HTTP server. And let's just start this on 80, see if we can get access. Okay, so 80 is fine. And what we can do now is we can say, let's put this in our user folder. If I could type, that'd be all right. Okay, so we could say certutil.exe, URL cache, split, and then we're going to split the file. We're going to grab it from our address. And then we'll just call it shellcode.xml when we bring it over. Okay, it brought it over, completed successfully. You could see that it came over here on our server. We could type in dir, we could see that it's here. Okay, let's go ahead and Control-C on that. Let's bring over MSF console and get our Meterpreter running here so we can be listening for this. So we're going to use the exploit handler. It's multi-handler. Okay, we show options. So we need to set a payload. We're going to set our payload identical to what we used, which was Windows, and then I believe it was Meterpreter reverse HTTPS. The tab is taking forever. Don't know why I tab. Okay, let's try options again here. Okay, so let's set the L host to RIP. We'll set the L port to 443, and let's go ahead and just run this. Okay, so we've got the listener here. Now, based on that article, what we need to do is we need to run that framework, that msbuild framework, with our shellcode. I'm just going to copy and paste the syntax over so I don't have to type it all. So this is what it looks like. This is the folder it's in, the msbuild.exe. As I said before, it's identical build to the one that was in the article. So if we go ahead and try this, should send it over, and then we get a Meterpreter session. Okay, so now we have our Meterpreter session. And this is where things got interesting, because we have bypass of app locker, right? And we've done a ton of enumeration at this point. Enumerated inside and out, and really can't find anything. It was really a struggle just to find the msbuild. And then I thought to myself, well, the box name is Fighter, and usually in these hack the box type deals, the box name has something to do with some sort of exploit on the machine, typically. Not always, and we already did see the Street Fighter webpage, so if the Street Fighter webpage was it, that was it. But I thought as some sort of last-ditch effort that I should try to at least search for Fighter. So let's open up a new window, and I'll show you what I did. Just said search exploit Fighter, and sure enough, we have Street Fighter 5 capcom.sys kernel exploit here. So this is a privilege escalation exploit. We can verify that it's running if we type shell, and then we could do an SC query on Capcom, and you can see it's a kernel driver here, it's running, and this is exactly what we want. So upon reading the requirements on this, we do have to be a 64-bit session. Right now we are not a 64-bit session, we are running on a 32-bit session, and we need to elevate that over. A nice thing is that there's a migrate process in Metasploit. So what we can do is we can type in PS, and this will show us all the processes that are running. And you can see that we've got the SQL server running on 64 bits. We've got this con host, we've got command.exe, and we've got our PowerShell running on 86, and also our msbuild running on 86. So those are our two previous shells. So what we can do is we can migrate over to a process. We can migrate over to, let's say 1208. 1208 is this one here. It's a SQL server. I'm going to migrate off to that. That should be successful. Let's see. Okay, completed successfully. I'm also going to go ahead and kill the other session here. Let's kill this. And okay, let's background our session now. And let's talk about the second part of this. So if we search Capcom, Metasploit already has a module for us. We can say use exploit Windows local capcom.sys exec, show options. Okay, so we need to set the session. Another thing that you don't see in the background is you need to set the port. So we got to set the L port to 80. Let's see if the options come back. And I always like to set the L host too, because sometimes they throw in like a 192 address and it's just annoying to have to cancel it and go back. So I like to set the L host and the L port just in case. And now let's go ahead and run it and see what happens. And see, it's still set it to 192. Let's show options again, see if it shows it. Okay, so we'll set lhost 10, 10, 14, 12. Run it one more time. Okay, so it's correct now, but here's the issue. It's saying that our exploit aborted due to failure. It's not vulnerable. Exploit not available on the system. And this drove me nuts for hours, because I sat there and I thought, well, maybe I'm wrong on the exploit, you know, but I was almost certain that it had to be that. I was 99% sure. I had my process migrated over to 64 bits. We're running on the right L port. What could be wrong? Finally, I decided that it was the Metasploit module that was wrong, and I went in there and had to manually fix it. So let's kind of look at what that looks like. If we search Capcom, locate Capcom, we can see that we have this Ruby right here. Let's copy this and we'll just gedit into it. So we have this failure not vulnerable, exploit not available. That's the first thing I looked for. So if we look through this, you see there's a check and a check result. Exploit failure not vulnerable, exploit not available on the system. I just went ahead and deleted that. And while I was at it, I deleted the architecture too, because I don't want it checking for that. So I just got rid of all those lines and hit save. The thing that we can do here is just type reload, and it'll reload the module we're sitting on. Okay, now we can type run and see what happens. And there we go. So we got a second shell. The thing is here, it could go a couple different ways. So if for some reason that the shell didn't open, and we would have to go in and either migrate our process to a 64-bit, a different 64-bit process, or the first thing I'd like to try is migrating it over to this 3936. So sometimes I've noticed this shell is finicky, but migrating the process over to the one that it just created typically works as well as an elevation. So we've got this command shell here. If we type in who am I, we are system, and now we can cd to users. We could type in dir here. So if we cd over to decoder, cd desktop, dir, you can see the user.txt files here. Okay, so let's go to the administrator. And if we went to go capture that flag, you'll notice that it's its own thing. We've got a root.exe. We don't have a flag here. And we've got a check dll.dll. So that's a pain. If we run this root.exe, it asks for root.exe and a password. So we just type in something, password, and it returns this check returned 0. So basically, we're going to have to reverse engineer this and figure a way out to find the password. So that's interesting. It really helps to know somebody if you don't have access to IDA Pro. If you can know somebody that has IDA Pro, it's good to befriend them because you have to ask them to run these things for you from time to time. So one of the guys in our group does have IDA Pro. So what he did was he ran it through IDA Pro, and let's show a screenshot kind of what that looked like. So if we bring this over, I'm going to zoom in on it a little bit here. Okay, so let's talk about what we see. So we've got a few things going. We've got the function which uses A1 as a base address, right? And it adds in, I don't know why that did that. Okay, so we've got A1, and then we've got this V1 that it adds in. We can also think of it as just A1 V1. And then it has an XOR here, which this looks like it would be, you know, to the 9th power, but actually this is an XOR, with an XOR meaning that the value returns 1 if and only if 1 bit is set. So if we think about that, let me bring out a pen here. And we don't need to understand this fully, but if we have a bit here and we have another bit here, it's going to return 0 because there's 2 bits set. So you only can have 1 bit set for it to return 1. So it would look something like this. So basically what we have is we have A1, V1, XOR of 9 is equal to an array, which this is our array, of V1. So we can do a couple different things. We can write code out to solve this, which I do have. So if we just hit over here and say next, we'll zoom in on this as well. So if we look at this, we take the array and then we throw it through here in our array to the XOR of 9, and we print out the result. We can also do something that I like to do, which is easier here. there is a GitHub Cyberchef, which I also have posted to the blog page. And you can take this XOR brute force, and we could take the sample 1 through 100. We put the array value in here, and then we just bake it, right? And we know the XOR is 9, so if we look at the key of 9, it's the only one that looks even close. And actually, this is a typo here. It is ODO, which will result in odio la feta. So odio la feta means I hate the feta in Italian, and that is actually the string. So if we were to input this and make this program and then print it back, it would actually return odio la feta as well. So those are just a couple of different ways to do it. And just as a proof here, I went back and looked. This was missing here, so if you look at it, it's odio la feta here. So this is just a fine way to do it as well. Either way, you could write your own program, but I'm lazy, and I'm definitely more comfortable doing it this way. So that's really it. So we enter in that string, and it returns the root hash, and we enter that in. We're good to go. So this box was pretty difficult overall. Definitely one of the harder ones I've done. The hardest one I've done, honestly, because I've only done 6 up to this point now, and challenging myself to do this was definitely worth it because I learned a lot, and working with a team definitely helps. Knowing people that have useful tools help as well. So for example, I have Burp Pro. Not everybody on my team has access to it. Some people on my team have IDA Pro, and I don't have access to that. So definitely helpful to work in a team and solve these kind of problems, and definitely helpful to try the harder boxes and get better experience and get better as you go. So I'm definitely not an expert at this, but I am proving that if you put in the work, you can solve this as well. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this walkthrough. If you did, please subscribe, tell a friend, and keep viewing. Thank you so much.